Okay, welcome to the webinar. Really good to have you on board, and I would like to thank you for being with us. So today we're going to be talking about the digital skills emergency, and we've actually got a couple of Twitter links here, which should allow us to actually talk about this on Twitter. So the hashtag is skills emergency. The sort of Twitter handles are at Technology Health and at Kubrick Group. So I'm going to kick off with a Mentimeter. Hopefully you've actually got sort of Menti available to you. If you've not got Menti, what you need to do is just get any phone or digital device and actually load up www.menti.com. The code we're going to be using is 66994031. And anyone else that's been on a webinar before will know that I use this quite commonly. So that's 66994031. So the first question that we've got as you get onto Menti is, where are you from? Because I know that we've got a number of international sort of people joining us today. So are you from England? Are you from Wales? Are you from Scotland, Northern Ireland, US, GCC, Oceania, or other? So just it's good to see we've got some Scottish people with us. So there we are. We've got 75% from England, 25%. Oh, it's rising. We've got more from Scotland. We've got, yeah, some from GCC, some from Oceania. We've got 12 of you, 13 of you responded there. Fantastic. I'll just give you a couple more minutes, 15, 16, they're coming in. It's good to know who our audience is, and obviously be reflecting here on some of the themes around the digital skills emergency. So I don't know if many of you have seen, but on the BBC, we've had headlines, multi-industry headlines around a digital skills disaster in previous weeks, and quite a degree of commentary around skills, particularly in data and analytics. So today we're going to be reflecting on what that means for healthcare, especially in view of COVID and everything that's happened during COVID. Wonderful. So we've got 28 of you, most of you from England, quite a good contingent from Scotland, some from Oceania, GCC and other. Also lovely to see somebody with us from Northern Ireland as well. Great to have you involved, and thanks for those from Wales as well. Okay, so here's a question before we start this webinar. Really keen to know if you feel that your country or region has a digital health emergency. And we'll be taking this poll again at the end, just to see if it's actually changed your mind around what's happening. So 10%, 8.1% think we have, 1.3 unsure. So we've, yeah, that's wonderful. So most people here are thinking we do have a digital skills emergency. We've got some that are unsure, some who don't think we have. We've got 27 people who voted so far. So that's really interesting. You're sort of corroborating with the wider trend that we're seeing, certainly from the UK government and from the BBC around there being a you know, sort of digital skills emergency across sector. So that's really interesting. 30 of you have voted. Okay, so we're going to head on now into the webinar and hear a little bit from our speakers. So Katie, if you'd like to bring up the sort of speaker list, that would be fantastic. Wonderful. So our first speaker is David Roberts, who is the Executive Chairman at Technology, Technology being one of the partners in the webinar. We're then going to hear from Simon Walker, who is Managing Partner at Kubrick and also one of the co-founders. And then a case study from Joshua Simmons, who's Director of Data Strategy at Genomics England, around the practical application of addressing the skills emergency. And obviously, with my role as CEO of the NHS Digital Academy, I am very keen in all modes of bridging the digital skills emergency. Certainly with the Academy, it's a longer term initiative, but what's really interesting me is how the likes of Kubrick, Technology and Genomics England and others are working to, at all levels, bridge the digital skills emergency. So David, over to you. I'd be really keen to hear from you around Technology's view on the digital skills emergency.
Hey, thanks, Rachel, and welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Not too much, but a little. Look, Technology is an innovation business that's set itself the mission to support healthcare systems around the world adopt and embrace the many emerging facets of digital. And so we're really delighted to be able to share some thoughts with you here today with our colleagues. The potential impact of advancements in technology and data is actually quite profound. And I'm sure you're all seeing this in your own various organizations right now. And in some ways struggling to keep pace with it, particularly as things are speeding up as they currently are. And I always feel it's a difficult subject to have with healthcare leaders in that you have so many calls on your time and so many calls to prioritize things. Why should you prioritize the issue that we're talking about today? And I think we'd like to try and answer that question with you during the course of this session and through the questions and answers. Can I have slide 1, please? So health is tracking quite closely with what's been happening in other industries, industries that we're all familiar with in our daily lives, the likes of retail and financial services, where we've seen massive uptakes and changes in the way digital solutions are adopted and embraced, but also the adjacent industries to healthcare, like life sciences and health insurance, has also been very active now in adoption of digital techniques. So I think we can fairly well say that this is going to impact healthcare, and it's going to be something that we have to deal with over the next few years in quite a strategic way. And again, of course, I think you will all recognize on this call that COVID has given us a real push towards the adoption of many of these individual solutions and many digital solutions that we've seen hitting the way we conduct our lives. So health leaders at all levels, we believe, need to adapt and to embrace the impact of digital and the impact it will have on their organizations. But more importantly, these 4 items here around the impact it will have on transformation within healthcare, the issues to do with interoperability, and we still don't have a universal electronic health coverage in our healthcare systems in the UK. We do in other parts of the world, but this adoption and standardization is something that's fast coming and needs to come. That we're seeing quite dramatic care model innovation take place, not just through our core health services, but through third-party organizations and other players in the marketplace who see the opportunity to support healthcare using technologies. And those strategies and the capabilities that we see developing those is fast moving across all facets of our healthcare systems. The future of work is changing. Again, COVID has flipped us into a home working scenario, but our aging population and skill shortages generally, which we'll talk a little bit more about, is forcing us to rethink the way we actually deliver the services that we deliver across health services generally. And of course, the sustainability of our healthcare systems across the world, the UK and for other countries on this call today is very clear. And the financial and performance issues that we find faced by a whole range of demographic and social and economic factors is really pointing us to the need for us to embrace digital in a very substantial way going forward. Next slide, please. So I think you all know that the skills gap is growing. It's growing quite fast, and in health, it's not escaping the skills gap that we find. Health needs to increasingly take large numbers of graduates in order to keep pace, and it won't keep pace from those traditional pathways, as we know. There's currently a shortfall estimate in the NHS of about 100,000 staff, and by 2030, we're expecting this to rise above 200, close to 250,000, which is a huge number and something for us to be really mindful of. And we have some reference points here with the 2019 Topple review, which alerted us to the fact that 90% of NHS staff would need some form of digital training and education over the next 20 years in order for us to fulfill the obligations of what might be seen as quite a modest uptake in digital solutions in the way we run our organizations, we deliver care, and we support patients in their new locations of care, which are fast emerging. The West, we all again, I think, understand this, has an aging population, and that aging dynamic is not only putting more pressure on health services and growing the demands, but it's also contributing to that skills gap. And we have health limiting factors in the ability to pivot to new technologies at a speed which enable us to alleviate some of these challenges and leverage from them in a timely fashion. So we have a collection of issues coming together at the moment and over the last few years and going forward, which are going to be quite challenging for us if we don't actually address them. Slide 3, please. So we believe we need to find new ways to re-energize the health workforce. We need to give them a sense of this is possible. It is absolutely within our gift to be able to pivot to these new solutions and technologies that are going to impact every facet of the way we execute on healthcare, and embrace those changes and actually put the power into the hands of our employees and staff such that they can actually start to remove the rate limiting factors on transformation, because ultimately it is transformation that we need. The current trajectory is quite unsustainable, and we do need to shift away from doing this to people and working with people in a sustainable way, educating and learning that drives new ways for us to actually overcome the challenges that are coming over the horizon, or actually on the horizon right now. Slide 4, please. So how do we do this? Well, we definitely need to ready our leaders. And at this point, I would say we do have to have boards within our organizations that are conversant with digital strategy and digital techniques. We have to appoint these people with a very clear mind's eye that they're leading organizations that have to become digitally competent and go through transformations which will enable them to lead their organizations appropriately. The leaders in our organizations at all levels need to understand the transformative impacts and benefits of digital and the impact that it's going to have on the services that they provide and the people that they're actually caring for. And the relationship with truly disruptive levels of improvement in the way that we deliver services is going to be important. So we also need to recognize that new roles and professions are going to emerge from this era. It's not just going to be about digital in its pure form. We know that we have a deficit in data scientists, in behavioral scientists and economics, and in digital transformation skills. And these are reasonably new things to health services that they're going to have to adopt and embrace. And we think a whole new industry will actually emerge from this ultimately over time and replace some of the more traditional roles that we see in our current organizations and establishments. We definitely need to build a much stronger literacy across the entire workforce, and in fact across society, that actually digital first is the way that we're going to engage in a raft and a range of services that we traditionally would have seen happening face to face that aren't going to be there as we move forward. And to be honest, we also need to stay up with customers. I think as a health industry, it's important that we recognize that consumers are experiencing a digital revolution in their daily lives and other parts of their life. And actually health is seeing a bit of a chasm at the moment appearing between those lives and what we're able to provide in healthcare. And we need to actually find a way of actually fulfilling that. And I don't think anybody is not very cognizant of the need for security, trust, in this governance arrangements in this digital age, and finding contemporary solutions to match the expectation of our patients and our staff as we go forward. These issues aren't going away, so we have to find solutions to them, and we have to find and bridge the skills gap that we see emerging, which will prevent us from following this journey if we don't do that effectively. So we have some thoughts to share with you, with my colleagues who are going to speak to you shortly, and then we can engage in some discussion about the opportunities of how we can work this through in a pragmatic and sensible way. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, David. And just one question. So please feel free to put into the chat questions. We're going to ask a couple as we go along with each speaker, and then probably have a Q&A for around about 15 minutes at the end. But one question, David, how seriously are healthcare systems taking the skills emergency in terms of it becoming a rate limiting factor for their development and progress?
Rachel, I think healthcare systems take seriously skills gaps because they have to. Their risk profile is such that they understand when something is missing, how important it is and how difficult and dangerous it can be. I think people are just beginning to realize that actually the solution to digital is not necessarily non-digital people or non-trained people in that space to do things. And I see across the world, many organizations now recognizing that these new skills, the training of their staff in their entirety is a priority for them. And I can see that pivoting taking place. But I don't think it's universally been accepted and adopted yet. And I think that's why we felt the need to have a webinar like this today to say, look, this really needs to come up the agenda and it really needs to be a priority for you to think about how you actually address these issues going forward.
Wonderful. Thanks for that, David. Now we're going to hear from Simon. Simon is the managing partner at Kubrick and also co-founder. And I'd like to, talk to you, Simon, at the end of this, really about some of the very interesting demographics that you're going to share with us. So over to you, Simon.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Hi, everybody. As Rachel said, I'm Simon. I should put a bit of a disclaimer in front of everybody at the moment. I'm hugely biased that this is a problem that we're all facing. So much so, 5 years ago, I bet the farm on that this was going to be an issue and co-founded Kubrick, and we exist purely to solve that, to help solve the global digital skills emergency that we see. So I should probably caveat this that for the few that said they didn't think there was a problem, hopefully I can go in some way of convincing you that there is. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I believe that we're seeing is probably the largest challenge that is facing society and industry at the moment. And if we can just go on to the next slide. And COVID has done a lot to accelerate this pace of change that we're already witnessing. So this is from Microsoft, which was their predictions that in the wake of COVID of where the gap would be around digital roles. In fact, one of the interesting things that sit underneath this is actually just in the UK alone, by 2025, they predict that there are going to be 4 million extra open positions just in data analytics, machine learning, and AI. And if you think we have a working population of around 33 million, for me, that was a huge challenge. As an entrepreneur, that was very, very attractive to be able to see if we could actually go some way of providing a solution to organizations and also society. Next slide, please. So what do? Well, we create the workforce that goes into a lot of industries. We're now the UK's largest graduate employer of data and machine learning roles. In fact, this year alone, or in the last 12 months, I should say, we've had over 50,000 applications, and we hire just over 1% of those. So probably that brings into sharp focus maybe some of the challenges that we face in terms of how we are selecting, and certainly this led us to do this piece of research work where we looked at where our normal hunting ground was for data. We looked at maths, physics, those type of environments, and actually we had to think outside the box, and we had to actually look at how do we solve this digital skill shortage. We've got to be able to look at other disciplines, and one of the terms we coined was being data aligned, because not only is it a problem being able to get the right people, but what we're also facing is there is a real diversity issue. And for those of you that run data teams or run technology teams, you will understand that diversity is a huge problem as well, not just gender, but also racial, culturally, neurodiversity. and data is one of these areas where, and certainly we look at it, is having a homogeneous team and having actually affects the performance of your data team quite considerably, and its diversity of thought, and the different people that may be your customers or your patients within healthcare, that is critical to get an understanding of what they want and actually asking different questions of that data. Next slide, please, Katie. So what we did was we reviewed a huge pool of graduates, and we looked at people coming from STEM, but not just STEM, but what we termed as data aligned, and we looked at being able to widen our net and expand our pipeline. And one of the things that I'm going to summarize with for everyone is basically three tactics I believe everyone can employ to be able to get a better pool of people coming into your business to fulfill these data roles. Next slide, please. So one of the things we immediately saw was actually, if you look at the top tier STEM universities and look at first and 2-1s, one of the interesting things is at GCSE level, you've got a real gender balance that's going on, and actually it's often called the leaky pipeline, and this is the start of it. And as A levels come on board, you can start seeing the reduction in female students, and that trend continues. And actually also going into actual workforce, the leaky pipeline continues. So we could see that was a acute problem facing us. Next slide, please. So what we looked at was, we actually looked at data aligned degrees, and we looked at what happens actually if we start widening that requirement and widening that net. So we looked at STEM with data line degrees first and 2-1, and in fact we were really amazed about what came through. Really, was suddenly we had a greater pool of female to male candidates. A really good small example of this to go into to give you a bit of a case study was, we found that data engineering, one of our practices, in fact, biochemistry, we had some phenomenal performances of our data engineers, and it correlated very strongly that people that had a biochemistry degree, in fact, not only did you get a greater proportion of females within that degree subject, but also they made absolutely cracking data engineers. So this is a tool that we're now using across our business to ensure that not only can we drive diversity within the business, but also we can make sure that we have the numbers coming in that we clearly require. Next slide, please. So one of the other things that we looked at was actually how open were our clients to upskilling, because one of the things that we've got to also make sure of, if you take our very first data engineering practice, which was back at the back end of 2016, beginning of 2017, if you now compare what they learned in that very first data engineering cohort to now, they are probably, there's probably only 15-20% similarity in technology. I mean, back then it was all about Hadoop and Cloudera and things like that. And now it's very much on the actual cloud providers. So it's very important, it's critical that people are able to put time aside when they're working to invest in upskilling. And actually, as an employer, a lot of employees are looking for that, because they understand that the market, they understand that next generational technology is constantly changing at a pace that we're not used to. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry,
Wonderful.
thank you. Carried away.
That's all right.
So
Simon,
I'd just end, Rachel. My three messages would be that one of the things that I've seen is the unfillable role. So it's a real phenomenon going around, I think, and it's very damaging for organizations. So the unfillable role is when someone says, I need someone with 5 years experience that has this type of technology and this type of technology, and they've got to be with this background. If you look at the acceleration of the market and the pull on the candidate pool and the growth, and if you look at the Microsoft facts that there's going to be 4 million new roles, that just isn't possible. So we are seeing clients actually damaging their business because there is this kind of unfillable role that gets a life of itself, and certain line managers, I think feel quite a bit sense of pride on this. So I would be very aware of the unfillable roles and actually look at being able to take people that might have the technical expertise or at least the willingness and give it, and then that follows into putting time aside to prioritize their training so they are able to fulfill the unfillable role, which is never unfillable. And then finally, I would also say that, throw the net wide with either your HR departments or your own recruitment practices and think about what backgrounds people might have that align themselves very, very neatly to the roles that you're looking for. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon. And I have had one question through here, which I think is quite interesting. How do we look differently? And it does relate to that question about 5 years experience. How do we look differently at describing who might be the right person for these new roles? How do we, sort of describe the attributes?
Yeah, it's something that Kubrick Group we constantly look at. So I think what it comes down to is and it's quite hard to be tangible about this, but I'm a true believer of attitude and passion is probably my go-to first. We've got a hugely industrious graduate pool and now apprenticeships, and I think you can see the hunger and passion. So that would be my first one. The other one would be do they understand either next generational technology or where we specialize in? Do they understand data? Do they understand the power of it, the concept? I'm not asking them to be a Python coder. That stuff you can teach, but it's all about the foundation that you're looking for. So high degrees of passion, understanding what the possibility of data can do, a logical problem-solving mindset.
And also, do you think we need to intervene right away across the leaky pipeline? Because I certainly know from Dame Wendy Hall's work around STEM and inclusiveness that the leaky pipeline is a problem. But I just wondered how far Kubrick get involved in that to maintain our talent and keep them on track for the careers that potentially they will be useful for.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, it starts so early on, and I understand that when you're employing people, that's all very well and good. But I suppose the parents in the audience that may have daughters, I'm one of them. It starts with us saying the message, and you go all the way through. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. Kubrick are in a fortunate position that you don't need to have the knowledge, so we can bring people in, but we've got to battle, we've really got to prove that this is something that, and talking about gender on this one, that actually a female graduate of biochemistry is an example I use. They can actually see themselves in this role, and they're actually, they have confidence that they're going to bring something to this, and they feel comfort that that is an environment where their skill set is really needed. So I think it's actually a bit of it's a PR exercise as much as anything else, and it's down to an organization. It's making them look like an attractive employer for those type of individuals.
And that's really pertinent to me because I studied genomics and biochemistry, so I made that. But also well, yes, I do love working with data, but very interestingly, I followed script. My mum was a programmer DBA, and I had a professor of computing who was female in the family. So it's very interesting because I just followed script, but I'm very aware that other people who didn't have that right next to them, right. It's unless you see one, you can't become one, which is very interesting. And that's the work that Dame Wendy Hall's done and has highlighted that we need more role models and more awareness. So thank you so much for that. that, Simon, please continue to put into the chat or use Twitter to send me any questions you've got. Now I think we're on to Joshua Simmons. Are you there, Joshua? So Joshua is, you there?
I am.
Wonderful. So Joshua, you're Director of Data Strategy at Genomics England, and I've had the privilege of working with you both academically at the Academy and also, supporting some of the work you've done at Genomics England. So I'd really like to know how you are actually practically looking at these skill gaps and addressing them. So over to you, Joshua.
Sure. So next slide, please. So it's worth giving me a little bit, giving a little bit of background about Genomics England to kind of put things in context. So Genomics England is a limited company wholly owned by the UK Department of Health and Social Care. And we provide a digital ecosystem for genomic precision medicine and research. So I'll get into a little bit what that actually means. But the reason I pointed out is because we're on the cutting edge of digital medicine. So actually using data and artificial intelligence and top-end data science to actually fuel better diagnostics and better treatment in real time. So that's really important to understand. So Genomics England was founded from the 100,000 Genomes Project, which was actually started by the former Prime Minister David Cameron. His son Ivan actually had a rare disease, which was Ohtahara syndrome. And unfortunately, he died of that. But it was a passion for him to actually start this. And what's interesting about the 100,000 Genomes Project is what we thought would be very challenging with that project is the sequencing. At the time that it was started, the cost of sequencing and the technology around sequencing was still fairly pricey and not as effective as it is today. But we were actually able to overcome that. And what has actually been more challenging is building an environment which allows us to scale the research and the insights that go around using that data, because it is very, very large data. From the 100,000 Genomes Project, there's been two services that have been really launched that are fundamental to Genomics England as a business, which is the Genomics Medicine Service, which we support on behalf of NHS England, which means that any patient within the NHS at a healthcare system level within England, any patient in the NHS that needs or is eligible for a genetic test for a rare disease or for even for sequencing of tumors for cancer is able to have those sequences. And that is then fed into our pipeline where we can do interpretation on that data alongside their clinical data. That is in our high-scale research environment. So we bring together that genomic data, electronic health records, which could be their hospital records or primary care records, detailed cancer information, and we provide that in a trusted research environment to researchers and clinical interpretation personnel to actually to diagnose rare diseases and to recommend treatments for cancer. And the reason that that's really important is because in rare disease, a typical patient spends about 8 years trying to get diagnosed, during which time they get more and more ill along the way. And in cancer, about 50% of cancer cases are actually late stage diagnosis. So it's really important that they receive the right treatment. And certain tumors are more receptive to immunotherapy or chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So it's really important that they get the right type of therapy, and that can be determined with their genomic information. So really at the end of the day is what we are is this kind of this picture here at the bottom right, which we call the infinity loop, and we're bridging the gap between evolving genomic healthcare and accelerating genomic research, and those two feed each other. But really what we're doing is bridging the gap between actual research, translational medicine, and the patient, and bringing benefits to the patient. So it's really critical that we have the right skills digitally to support that. So next slide, please. But it isn't just about technology. So it's the healthcare domain and the bioinformatician domain, which back that genomic research, is a very complicated domain to be in, and it requires some experience to understand it. So going back to Simon's talk about the unfillable role, it's very difficult to find people who have a really good sense of technology and a really good sense of clinical understanding and or genomic understanding. So, and alongside that as well, it's really important that we have a diverse workforce, because the problem that we're dealing with is very much rooted in diversity. So there are communities out there that are more susceptible to rare disease because of their genetic makeup and because of their ancestral history. And it's very important that actually when we're doing the research that we do, or we're supporting the research that we support, or building the systems that we build, that we're able to remove the bias from the system by having a diverse workforce who actually understands the communities that we're dealing with. So we're really dealing with a very difficult kind of targeted employee that we're trying to hire. So, and yes, some skills can be taught, but it takes time to build up that capability and to actually build people who can do that. And we don't have necessarily the time to do that. So next slide, please. So just thinking about the size of it, as far as, yes, we're dealing with a really hard employee to onboard, but also we need quite a few of them. So if I just put it in numbers, in the next year alone, our workforce is quite small at the moment. It's about 220 staff. About half of that is technology. We're adding 50% again, so actually 100 staff in the next year, and half of those, so about 50 of them, will be technologists. The roles are, as I said, they're technical, but also requiring the domain knowledge, bioinformatician background, or clinical data background. And if you think about the fact that the NHS is looking for this as well, we're competing with acute trust and clinical commissioning groups and all kinds of entities that need these specific overlapping skills, and a growing life sciences market as well that is very much needs those bioinformaticians, so pharma and other companies. We require cloud-aware architects. So as Simon alluded to earlier, it's not enough just to know Hadoop or to understand kind of very specific platforms for dealing with big data. What we really need is people who understand, Amazon has a number of different offerings within their AWS suite, and we need people who understand, the difference between a Redshift database and an Aurora database, and all these different offerings that AWS can give. So we require cloud-aware architects, platform engineers, data specialists, and genomic scientists. As I said before, in addition to a general market that might be finance or other organizations that need digital skills, we're also competing with that life sciences market. We're competing with the NHS. We're competing with a lot of organizations that we're actually trying to enable and help. And our USP is our domain, so genomics, not our tech. Our tech is fairly standard. And we have chapters that enable cross-pollination of technical skills, but not necessarily domain knowledge. So quite often in organizations, people are grouped into their technical orientation rather than their domain knowledge, or their domain knowledge rather than their technical orientation. And so it's very hard to do cross-pollination of both the domain and the technical skills, and that's really important. And lastly, the NHS Digital Academy, which Rachel is the CEO of, teaches clinicians to be digital leaders, but there's no equivalent to take digital ready workforce and actually train them in the clinical basics and to get them up to speed with those data sets. So we have a lot of people that are very talented on the technology side out there, but it's very difficult to onboard them because they don't have the domain knowledge that we need. Next slide, please. So how are we dealing with this? So there's two parts to how we deal with this within Genomics England. So we've actually been working quite closely with Kubrick, who's done a very good job with us to date in providing call-off contract resource that they actually invest their time and money into, 4 weeks of training to get them to a place where they understand the digital problems and the technology that they need to come on board. And they've provided that to us very, very well. They also deal with some of those challenges around diversity so that we don't have to take that on board. And they've even gone a step further in that they've provided or they've generated within their organization a synthetic hospital data set that they can actually train individuals on. So they've kind of done this really in-depth training program that we need to kind of boot camp people to be ready to come into us. And also we make clear to the candidates the benefits that we offer over other employees. So obviously we have a very altruistic mission, and our aim is to improve people's chances of survival and to improve their lives. So, a lot of children with rare diseases, getting them early diagnosis and improving not only their lives, but their parents' lives and their families' lives. So, we have a really great culture that we can offer from that standpoint. But alongside that, we also still have to offer competitive salaries. And what's been helpful from that standpoint is that as a business, rather than just another kind of arm's length body for the government, we've been very able to be a bit more flexible on that side around offering competitive salaries. And then once we have recruits in, we invest in those recruits. So one of the ways that we've done that is to date, we've offered kind of a £500 no strings attached individual learning budget for each employee so that they can invest in their own training and their own leadership skills and getting them up to speed with the latest, say, AWS architecture or whatever it might be. And we also invest in similar training for consultants. So we've had discussions with Kubrick about how can we help to work together and collaborate to build up those skills that we need for people to come in. And then also we've now been developing a standard skills matrix to bring our kind of more junior resource up to a higher level. So one of the things that we've done is we've aligned our data engineering role specification with the government digital services senior data engineer role specification, so that at least across the government, we're using a standard role to describe the type of person that we're looking for. Which the government is a huge employer in the UK, so that gives us a bigger market and pool to actually draw from, because we know that those people have met certain criteria to come work with us. And what we've promised our own internal employees is that actually we're going to bring them from being at that lower level of data manager, or data wrangler, or data analyst to being a data engineer or being a data scientist, because I believe personally in the future that automation and low-code tooling, so tools that make it really easy to do the job, will actually eradicate some of those lower-end jobs. And what's really important is that we have the people that have the sense to be able to put pipelines together in an automated fashion and develop insights out of the data. So that's more important for us. And from a skills matrix standpoint, you can see this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're actually looking for from people and trying to score that against them. So what we do internally is allow our employees to self-assess themselves, and then also go to their product owners and actually have them assess the employees as well, so that we can compare where they are. And then we assign badges for what they learn on the job or the training that they do to get them up to the next level to be able to reach that higher engineering level. So, but this is just addressing some of the issues. There's still, as I said, we're hiring 50 employees in the next year. It sounds like a small number, but they need to be incredibly competent, and it's difficult to get those resources when the entire market is now off the back of COVID actually doing digital transformation and looking for those same resources. So from my standpoint, for Genomics England, there's definitely a digital skills gap that needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Joshua. And I've got one question which does actually hinge on those 40 new or 50 new jobs. How much of the future do you think are these sort of sideways moves from careers, say from biochemistry into genomics, or big data and modern apprenticeships versus the traditional university education, which has got quite a lag time? What are your views on that? Do you think when you look at these 50 people, you'll be quite innovative about how you recruit them, or do you think you're going to have to be more traditional?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So for the majority of the roles that we're looking to permanently recruit, we're looking for established staff that have these high-end skills. So we're looking for people who have been in other organizations, and we're hoping to teach them possibly the domain. But it doesn't mean that we can't go the other way. We have to find the right fundamentals and then basically build on that capability to bring people to the right level. It is very difficult to find everybody, you know, going back to Simon's point about the unfillable role. It's very impossible to find people that have everything. So we have to take some hit on some side. I think going forward, what's really important is that there is a capability to train both ways. So it's not just about trying to slap tech on top of domains and have people who are really skilled in their domain understand, you know, basic tech, because they might not be very good at it. I think it has to go the other way as well. We need to be able to teach tech individuals the basic fundamentals of, say, bioinformatics or clinical domain or whatever it may be, and actually have those together in MDTs and multidiscipline teams so that they can feed each other. So I think that if you build that side by side, it will really help accelerate people.
Brilliant. I'm going to head back to Menti now. I'm going to ask the audience some questions, and then we're going to go to Q&A. So feel free to put into the chat any questions you've got. I've got some here, also on Twitter. We've got #DigitalSkillsEmergency. A few people have been in touch with me on Twitter. So I'd like to ask you now, audience, after what you've heard from Kubrick, Technology and Genomics England, do you now believe that your country or region has a digital health skills emergency? Is it yes, no, or are you still unsure? So be really interested. Again, it's www.menti.com and the code is 66994031, and hopefully you will be able to vote there. I'm hoping that we've got people forming an opinion on that. So there we go. Still not got anybody through here. So just checking, are you able to do that? Are you able to register on that? Please speak up if not. Yeah. That's it. Okay. Right, I'm not sure we're seeing it through, so I'm just going to refresh that screen and see. Yes, they're starting to come through now. Thank you. So we've got 18 people who think that we do have a digital skills emergency. No are saying no, and no are unsure. So I think the jury may have been persuaded that we have a digital skills emergency, which I think is good news. So on to the next question. The next question is, which skills do you think are the most urgent? Now, you know, from a CIO's perspective, I've noted down what I think are some of the urgent skills here. So skills around open data, skills here around data science, skills around cloud. I don't know, Joshua, what would you say for the top three for you? Jay, David, I don't know if you want to chip in as well with any of the skills that you think are urgent from your perspective. So we've got cloud. That's
yeah, so the one that's come up is really, and it's not just cloud, it's really understanding the nuances of cloud offerings, you know, AWS versus Azure, and how to use it properly in chains.
Jay, any views from you?
Yeah, I just think it's also keeping pace, isn't it? I think we're always talking about the skills emergency and looking at things in the presence of time, but it's actually about what does it look like in 5 years? How does the software, the cloud that we use now, how does that integrate with things moving forward? So I think it's also something about the people in the industry are always learning and having that sort of that desire to continually learn throughout their career.
So lifelong learning health systems, those sorts of things. David, what are your views around the skills?
You know, I think there's something for me at the system level around, you know, the art of the possible. It's still seen as a very niche boutique area. And the reality is what we're saying is that, no, this is going to become mainstream. it's not going to be unusual to have these sorts of skills in an organization by routine, and it is. We need lots of these people. So I think art of the possible for me is the ability to use the intelligence and the knowledge of these people to actually help you translate and transform your organization. That's where I think we have a huge gap, and boards and senior leaders don't understand the potential of these things well enough to actually dig us out of the operational holes that we're digging ourselves into through skill shortages, through demand excess, through financial non-sustainability. So for me, that's an important area that we have to engage this much broader knowledge base in, and we're a long way from that.
Simon, have you got anything that you'd add to the list?
Yeah, I've got to say, I was going to say pretty much exactly what David said. I suppose it plays on that data literacy aspect as well. But one of the things is, I think that sometimes we can be in danger with saying all of these technologies and things like that we're certainly, Kubrick, are very aware of not having tech for tech's sake. And actually, you know, the art of the possible, I think, is a really good comment, because it can go either way. You can see it as an unblocker, but equally, you know, you see AI banded around a lot, and people expect it to be the silver bullet. And I think the worry is that actually they suddenly lose faith, because they thought it was going to be this absolute solution to everything, and they didn't know how to set it up correctly first, or whether it was appropriate for the challenge they had. So I think I sometimes worry that people suddenly might be turned off of this because they might have one bad experience where they thought it was going to solve everything and it didn't.
It's a really good point. And I like whoever's put healthcare in this word cloud, because actually when we come to the academy, I have to go back and teach the doctors and nurses about the system they work in, because they only know one little corner of it. And I think that's really interesting. There are a few people that have a good oversight of healthcare and perhaps the domain knowledge to actually operate. So that's really pertinent. Thank you so much for that. Wonderful. Generating tidy data. Thank you, whoever put that, because data is part of the enabler for all of this advanced work we do. And that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about. So another question then, what would you like to see happen to address the digital health skill gap? We talked about various things today, and obviously we've got, you know, other assets like modern apprenticeships. We've got, you know, changes that we can make to medical education, nursing education. Be really keen to know from the audience as well what they personally would like to see happen to address these skill gaps that they're seeing. So again, this should be a free form piece. I'm going to ask Joshua, actually, from your side, and certainly from your experience working on academic programs, what do you think would be useful within the university system, certainly, and the apprenticeship system? Government investment, we got there.
Yeah, so I think I just put the government investment one, because I think that there needs to be at a government level, there really needs to kind of be a fire under the rear end, really, to understand that, you know, we have a very wide workforce that is, I think, going to end up very unhappy if they're not able to keep pace with change. You know, I come from a family of automotive workers that basically got left behind by automation. I saw the same thing happen with my, you know, my uncles and my grandfather and things like that. So if we don't make that investment now to get people into a position where they can change their career options, we're really going to suffer, and we're going to lose a lot of knowledge, because you can bring a lot to the table from your experience that, you know, you might not have learned in school. So I think that, you know, academia is very important. I think that there does need to be a reverse on, you know, bringing highly skilled digital people to the domain and training them up. And I also think that we need to take advantage of getting people to change their careers completely, and look at their options.
Well, we've got some amazing sort of feedback here. So, you know, more accessible training, working with our existing workers, that 90%, more education, schemes to bridge the gap, policy changes, and I agree, you know, both David and I have worked on policy. Yeah, not measured by years of experience, engage children from school level, absolutely, that the government are, you know, really recognizing that. So school coding and education awareness, enabling citizen developers. And I think citizen scientists are part of the answer. That's something that is, you know, very much emerging. education curricula to include digital problem solving skills. Wonderful. So, you know, I think the Department of Education's got a role to play here, and increasing training and awareness from those collecting health data. Yes, the value of the data and how it's becoming a capital asset and is no longer a sort of disposable piece. It is something that will be used many times. Yeah, so wonderful feedback. What we're going to do at the end of this with Kubrick is actually take all of the feedback that you've given us, and we will play it back to you with just some of our commentary. So thank you so much for that. Just going to go back now, and while we're going back, just to answer the final questions that people have left behind. Jay, do you want to tell us a little bit about the webinar that we're going to have next week on the 17th at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We'd be delighted if everyone could again join us this time next week, and we'll be really focusing and moving the conversation forward to 2030, and thinking about how AI will change healthcare. And the 3 ways that we think that it might impact it, hopefully for the positive, and move things as forward as it may. And I think the tagline for the event is, it's not just words, data saves lives. And I think there's some really exciting tech we'd like to showcase next week. It should be pretty interactive, and we'd really appreciate it if everyone could join us there.
And that's brilliant, Jay. I know that Europe has adopted the Data Saves Lives hashtag, actually. It came from the UK, they've adopted that, and there's a growing evidence base of how data does save lives. So I'm really looking forward to our future vision of 2030 and how we can make that a reality next week. So I'm just going to invite our speakers back. So Simon, David and Joshua. Hamad's asked a question here about how we educate leaders in society on the importance of data, particularly with resistance from GP and others to making that data accessible. So I just welcome your views. So David, how do you think we educate our senior leaders from your perspective around the importance of data?
I definitely don't have the answer to this. And as you know, in the UK, we've got some issues around data rumbling at the moment, which I understand, but is also unfortunate. I think the issue for me is we need to get people to embrace the notion of data and the importance of data. And we have to, I think, remove the hype from a lot of what we talk about. And I think we heard today on the call, you know, what AI, and it gets a bit hyped up. And it does. And I think that frightens a lot of people. You know, if you are my age and of my educational background, then some of this language and tone will frighten people who are in senior leadership positions. And they actually need to be given the time to understand what we mean when we talk about many of these concepts, including data. And I think some really practical examples, dumbing down some of this stuff for you know, certain generations and certain people, particularly those who lead organizations who will tend to be of a particular demographic, is going to be really important, because what we need them to do is to buy into the notion that data is fundamental to the way we're going to run our lives, and in health terms, our services in the future. And I think there's enough evidence around the world that it will have that disruptive influence on it. But at the moment, we have a blockage because we have a knowledge gap, and we have a confidence gap, and we need to lift that confidence in that base knowledge such that people embrace. And I think then we'll start to see a much wider acceptance of the fact that this is okay. This is not to be frightened of. We need to, though, embrace it and get on and deal with what it means for us.
Thanks, David. Simon, we've got a question from Ewan here about how you balance the slightly opposed factors. The first being accepting applications from those who are perceived to meet the standards of Kubrick, and the second being perhaps a perceived requirement to train as many consultants as you can to fill a meaningful proportion of the quoted 4 million upcoming jobs in the UK for data. So what's the required number to be interested in capable candidates? What's that sort of balance?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked me the question so I could speak it. I was trying to type furiously away. So
it's all right. Yeah, go ahead. I think
saves my fingers. So look, it's a problem that I would say we talk about constantly at Kubrick. So we have to have a step. We're a business. We are solving a really, really critical challenge, but we are a business. So in terms of our size, I'd love to be able to fulfill those 4 million, but you know, there's a certain amount of risk that we take on as the business, a certain amount of investment that takes. So we have to have a certain level that we take on. That said, though, I do think that one of the reasons that we we did the research that we did about data aligned degrees is because we were nearly falling guilty of the unfillable role. Yeah. So, you know, we were like, you've got to have maths, you've got to know stats, you've got to be able to communicate to stakeholders. You know, we're talking about people that are 22, 23, they haven't had too much experience. And suddenly I think and as we take on 2% of candidates, we're suddenly looking at ourselves going, hang on, this is a big ask, you know, and we're solving a really big problem here. So that's why we put in place the data aligned research to say, actually, how can we get these really good people, but throw that net wider and not do the unfillable role? So yeah, there is something else in the pipeline as well that we've just finally that we're also looking at is why does it just have to be graduates? So a number of organizations that we know, and it's predominantly financial services, that unkindly or whatever, often phrase it as the frozen middle. And these are individuals that can have up to 5 years experience plus, and they are in roles that's very business facing. They have a great deal of experience, very, very valuable skill set, but there is a concern of obsolescence around their skill set. And actually, can we take those people on and actually train them in these skills? So we are about to run an experiment that we're launching in August to see if we can widen that net further, you know, not just the entry level, which we focus on, but actually on that maybe more experienced end.
And I think that's going to be key to getting scale and pace for the change in the system to reimagine careers with people who have been in careers for some time. So thank you for that, Simon. The final question is for Joshua. And Joshua, this is about one of our favorite joint subjects, synthetic data, which obviously I know Kubrick have done quite a bit of work on as well. And we jointly worked on some research, didn't we, about 2 years ago. So how do we create more synthetic data in your view? I've certainly got a view on this, but I'd be very keen to know what your view is on that, and also how can we upskill new junior roles using synthetic data as well?
Yeah, so I think the synthetic data can definitely unlock a lot of potential, and I think that we need more of it. I think that the challenge is when you're trying to meet, so I mean, for instance, it's easy to generate a dummy set and just say, okay, here's a dummy set, right? But it's about using that data in context and using it with a load of other data that interlinks to that data. So it's fine to generate, say, a hospital data set. You might even be able to get a very specific one, or to get an open data set that's been generated somewhere, but then linking that to a primary care data set to understand their longitudinal record, and linking that to a cancer data set to understand how it developed, you know, how it influenced their somatic development of cancer. So really, it's not just about, you know, generate a synthetic data set, but it's doing it on a normal basis with all of the data that's required to actually understand the full problems that you're trying to solve, and making that statistically relevant to the problem that you're actually trying to understand, so that you're getting real world domain knowledge from what you're doing. And there are some vendors out there that have been doing some really great work in this place. So Diveplane is one of them. MD Clone is another one that we worked with previously. And what they do is they actually build interfaces that make it easy to say, I want to select all this data and I want to study these particular variables, and I want to generate a data set out of that. So I think that there needs to be a lot more synthetic data. I think that you know, if there's one thing that leaders need to be educated about data, it's understanding that synthetic data is that it's safe and that it can be used. There are still challenges in that space, reconstruction attacks, you know, nothing is ultimately 100% safe, but, you know, being able to do this as a first port of call rather than having to go through, you know, months and months of access process to get to a data set that you don't even know if you can use, that you know, it needs to be reversed and it needs to be synthetic data first.
And just to add to that from my perspective, Damon, I would love us to have synthetic data marts where dynamically, universities, students, researchers, those who are learning could pull down synthetic data, find insights, work on that, and we could get speed to insights using synthetic data and validating against real data once they're found. So from my side, synthetic data is something that certainly the UK is talking about, and other countries as well. So really keen that we use that to allow people to further their skills. So thank you so much for being with us this evening. As you can see, and as Jay outlined, we'll be back next Thursday, 17th, to talk about AI and how it's going to change healthcare by 2030. We'll be joined by Dr. Kit Latham as well, who'll be actually outlining some of the way that we can use different interfaces like speech to work on systems. I would like to thank very much Joshua, Simon and David for joining us tonight. We will be feeding back to you some of the outcomes from the Menti, and we'll see you again in a week's time if you can make it. So thank you for joining us. Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.